class? How can we protect our fiscal future and provide economic opportunity for all? Join us.
Well, right now, 2 days of talks wrapping up between the Taliban and the Afghan government. As these efforts to potentially end more than a decade of conflict are underway, there are some new questions being raised about the role of the American military, still very present on Afghanistan soil. Ben Collins, a U.S. Army Special Forces veteran and Green Beret, who served 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan, is the right guy to talk to this about. So these allegations from the New York Times are saying that the American forces, under the guise of training and advising, are actually acting more aggressively and insinuating we're still very much at war and on the offense in Afghanistan. What's your reaction to that piece in the Times?
Certainly. Well, I think any time that we're going to actually have soldiers in a combat environment, you have to essentially recognize that they are at war, certainly on a war footing, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and to think otherwise, I think, would be pretty detrimental, not just for us, I think, at home, but for the guys on the ground, because that's when politics start to, I think, override kind of tactical common sense. You
mentioned politics. That's what the New York Times is really tapping into, saying, hey, wait a minute, the White House is telling us the war in Afghanistan's over, but, you know, if you're shaking your head. That's what the Times is essentially doing as well, saying it doesn't seem like it.
No, it doesn't. And I mean, the Taliban, you know, every year there's the spring offensive that takes place. And this year we're already up at 75% higher casualty rates among the Afghan security forces than last year. So this time last year there was something about 2,700, and we're over 5,000 right now. So those are unsustainable numbers. And the reality is, if we actually want to see any of the progress that we have slowly made stay and not just completely devolve the way we've seen Iraq fall apart, we need to step up our support.
Based on what you learned in your 3 tours, what do you think we have to do?
Well, you know, we have to keep pressure on the enemy, right? So even though there are discussions currently taking place right now between the Afghan government and the Taliban, you know, the fact of the matter is you always have to remember, at least it was something that I think we need to remember, you know, Afghan has some pretty significant neighbors. You know, it's got Iran as a neighbor and it's got Pakistan as a neighbor. So, you know, those are some very influencing partners in this. You know, to be honest, I think we need to keep the fight up. So I think we need to re-engage. I think we need to let the rules of engagement ease off. I think we need to re-engage with some of the close air support assets. Look, it's one of those things where we either need to have the will to do it or not, right? I don't want to have our soldiers there, you know, the young men and women. We've already sacrificed so much. To just have them there with one hand tied behind their back, I think, is a disservice. So let's either do it or let's not.
You know, it's interesting you say that. When I speak to veterans, as my husband being among them, in Iraq specifically, he has the same sort of attitude, which I think surprises people here at home who haven't been on the battlefield, which is the willingness for those who have been in the fight to go back and continue the fight until it's done. Talk to us about that, because politically you don't hear a lot of lawmakers saying that, and also from the public. You know, you get this feeling of, well, we don't, you know, what about lives and being able to protect our soldiers in the right way? We don't want them getting hurt over there for a purpose that we don't completely understand. What do you say to that?
So, you know, I think probably your individuals like your husband and myself, you know, we're probably a little biased. And it takes something to step aside from that and try to look at it from a bigger picture. It's very hard to step away from the fact that, you know, these aren't just names and letters that, you know, we sign as a president. I mean, these are friends of ours that died. And that's American blood on foreign soil. And to a certain extent, to me, that's hallowed ground.
But you're saying it's worth it. It's worth it to finish the fight.
So it's worth it in the sense of, if we want to stop Afghanistan, and again, we've got Iran, we've got Pakistan, and you've got ISIS, which is increasingly becoming problematic. I think if we want to ensure that Afghanistan as a country doesn't go back to being a place where terrorists can thrive and have a safe enclave to do what they want to do, then there is something worth in that fight. Unfortunately, the politics and the will behind it here at home just don't really.
But do you think you're being listened to enough? I mean, there's been a lot of people that have deployed to these parts of the world. Do you think we're listening to our veterans enough about the way forward?
Look, I don't think we're listening to anybody right now, to be perfectly honest with you, right? I mean, we certainly have a president that doesn't want to call it offensive operations, yet we have soldiers out on the front line still. We have a Congress that can't pass a budget and a Defense Department that's still under sequestration. And as I said, you know, that you talk to anybody in the military right now, you know, we're on the back foot. You know, the budget cuts that have occurred, we haven't been able to train as we're supposed to, so we're not ready as we are. So there's just a lack of commitment overall, and the sad fact is, you know, our guys are on the front lines right now.
And as the New York Times suggests too, actively engaging when it needs to happen. Ben, nice to have you on set, by the way, today.
Thank you very much,
face to face. John?
More on our men and women in uniform ahead. The remarkable story of a woman who served on the battlefields of Afghanistan despite a ban